I'm Justin Clark. I'm the Menard Family Professor of Philosophy and Economics here at Ottawa University, and I'm a member of the Gwartney Institute. This is our third Urbit Meetup, and today we're going to hear from Christian Langalis, who is the Bitcoin ambassador at the Tlon Corporation. Christian is going to tell us a little bit about the motives that inspire both Bitcoin and Urbit, how these technologies complement each other, and how they even reinforce each other. It is a very interesting talk that sheds a bright light on what's hopefully a bright future. I hope you enjoy it.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Justin, for having me. And hello to all of you, though I can't see you. I can't see any of you. Is there any way to turn the camera around? Would love to see who I'm with. Hey, ahoy. How's everyone doing?
Great.
Man, it's been a minute since I was at college eating pizza during like a lunch meeting. So it's good to be with you all. Um, so yeah, as Justin said, I have sort of taken the title of Bitcoin ambassador at Tlon. I've been told that you're familiar, I guess, roughly with the Tlon Corporation and the as the entity that's leading development on Urbit. Um, I joined the project about a year and a half ago with one mandate, which was to make Bitcoin and Bitcoin be the monetary primitive of the Urbit operating system. And it's been going slowly at times, but it's finally nearly ready. We are launching the Bitcoin wallet later this month on April 27th. So I'll get you all the link to that event. But as I understand it, you students are part of a call it an academic center at the school that sort of centers around economics, and it has certain like laissez-faire or like Christian principles associated with it. So I thought, since it seems like sort of a place of theory, that I might begin there and just talk very briefly about what originally drew me to pursue this project of putting Bitcoin on Urbit, because if you're not hyper like deep down the crypto rabbit hole, it may seem like both things are sort of strange, but to me it's really a perfect marriage, and I guess if you'll permit me, I'd like to sort of explain why. So are there any questions before I start? Feel free to interject any at any point if you have questions.
I actually have one question, Christian. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sort of. Are you speaking into the microphone? I noticed that the audio sort of dipped a bit when you were doing that. The mic at the head of the room.
It might be directional with microphones. Can you spin it around? Okay. Very well right now.
Hey there.
So one question I have is
Justin, I'm afraid I can't hear you really at all. Could you speak into the laptop if you don't mind, or just maybe away from that microphone? It may have some feedback.
now very well. Testing.
Oh yeah, much better. That works far better if you don't mind.
Perfect. Could you say what you mean when you say that you wanted Bitcoin to be the monetary primitive in Urbit?
Sure. So Yes, Urbit is an operating system. It's a computer designed by Curtis Yarvin initially, and then built out by our engineers at the Tlon Corporation. And so this computer, if you're familiar with computer architecture, it has a like a mathematical specification for what the computer is, for what the computations it will recognize are. And then as you begin to translate that raw definition into something that is legible and meaningful to programmers, you have we call them kernel modules. So they're components of the core operating system that are essentially building blocks for building more descriptive, higher level applications. So these might be things like a file system, a networking protocol, drivers for devices, or basic things like secure environments for cryptographic secrets, or timing. Very basic. Think of the computer as the engine of a car, and you have all these different components that do different things. And so it's the parts under the hood, so to speak. And one of the great difficulties with the evolution of the internet was that all of the early acolytes, like Tim Berners-Lee, they were creating all these internet protocols, like beyond TCP/IP, stuff like HTTP, and or VoIP, like voice over IP. So all these, or email, all of these internet protocols were coming out to standardize ways of communicating. And basically, there was one that never happened, and it was MOIP, or money over IP. This was, of course, because the Byzantine generals problem was too difficult to solve. It took Satoshi's, not like the novel combination of cypherpunk technology that Satoshi output with his white paper in 2008 to really get this to work. And so in that sense, the Bitcoin becomes this lost like monetary protocol that we were all sort of hoping for. And now that Urbit has basically paved over the rest of the internet, we've taken the entire internet stack and distilled it down to the essentials required for a personal computer where all the applications are legible to the user. Now that we've done that, it makes sense to just take the Bitcoin money protocol, if you will, just off the shelf and insert it into Urbit. Obviously, we're not trying to reinvent sound money. That's a much larger project that I don't think could ever be replicated beyond Bitcoin. So we simply want Bitcoin to be useful as a protocol for any application that is on top of Urbit. So that means you could be writing a Twitter protocol for Urbit, like a Twitter clone, as we call it. We're all looking forward to this sort of thing, where maybe if you like a tweet, you could have a setting where you automatically tip the person who wrote the tweet 5 Satoshis or something like that as a token of your appreciation for the good content. So for this, you want to have a software library that you can easily call out to facilitate as one of these building blocks, as one of these primitives within the operating system to help you execute this transaction. So that's what I mean by, there should be, money should be this thing that is effortless to integrate into applications. And having done some work with legacy payment processing, I can tell you the difference between the technical difference between integrating Bitcoin and integrating, say, credit cards or ACH payments. It's truly night and day. So finally, we have this software capability that is, it's software for software developers. It's not software for the compliance department of Visa. We have this very robust open source way of paying anyone in any application in an extremely flexible manner. So I hope that wasn't too long of a digression, but that's what I mean when I say money should be an OS level primitive. Does that answer your question, Justin?
Yes, totally. Thank you.
All right, cool. So yeah, I'll go through some of getting back to, I guess, the theoretical stuff that drew me to this project. I'm going to start here actually. So this is the email signature of Tim May, who was the founder of the cypherpunk mailing list. So before we had, social networks like Twitter or Facebook, everyone used mailing lists. And, that was exciting. So it was just basically sending emails back and forth. And, it was, an ad hoc social network. And so Tim has this great email signature where he describes what his philosophy that he called crypto anarchy. So there's a list in this email signature that I think is less what I don't necessarily profess an ideological affinity for crypto anarchy. I mean, I'm certainly persuaded by it to some degree, but I think of this email signature less as a prescriptive idealism, but rather a description of the reality of how this large dialectic shift in call it just the geopolitical evolution of cryptography comes about. So if you'll permit me, and forgive the sound of my dog in the background, I'll briefly jog through this. Email signature, and you'll sort of be able to see, I hope, where Bitcoin and Urbit fit into this. So it begins, back in the 70s and 80s with encryption. So the U.S. government, the code breaking organizations like the NSA decide that they're going to use these computers to develop really sophisticated ways of having secure military communication. And so they develop all these encryption schemes, and eventually, computer scientists who are, not military based, determine how to use them and create open source versions of them. And so, if you want to read, the backstory of, Phil Zimmerman, or the ITAR, which is the International Traffic in Arms Regulation, of the control over encryption standards. It's very interesting. So it used to be considered a munition, basically, but now the cypherpunks, they have liberated encryption from the exclusive control of the government, and now they're ready to sort of put it to use. So encryption, of course, means private communication, and so when you start to think of like private secure communication, what do you want to use that for? And so the cypherpunks early on recognized that you could actually create a system of digital money by having a secure ledger that would contain what money everyone held. So this email signature, of course, was written before Bitcoin came out, but at the same time when other peer-to-peer digital currency experiments were happening, like Hashcash, B-Money, eGold, things of that sort. So that's sort of the next step into what might be called the critique of crypto anarchy. So the next step would be anonymous networks. So this sort of applies more to the just privacy of communication. And then you get digital pseudonyms. So the cypherpunks were very big on speaking under coded names that they believed were as good, if not better, than using, call it your real civic identity, your Fed name. So between anonymous networks and digital pseudonyms, there's the question of pseudo-anonymity. So you want to be known, you want to have permanent identity, but around something that doesn't correspond to, say, your meat space personage. So this is really where you could read in between the lines and see that Urbit very much encapsulates both of these things. So while the network is not entirely anonymous yet, there will be the ability to do encrypted Tor style routing. So the cypherpunks, they called it remailers. This is basically the concept of onion routing. So you get a message, and you unwrap one layer and you read the next address that it belongs to. So you send it on, and people keep on sending, forwarding, and unwrapping this message until you finally it finally arrives at the person who it belongs to, and they keep it and can read it privately without people knowing they were sent it. So basically the third and fourth items here, the anonymous networks and digital pseudonyms, it's basically a way of having at scale private communication, and without having to leak risky information. So the next item is zero knowledge. So this refers to I believe zero knowledge cryptography. So that's sort of the and it's still quasi bleeding edge. So this is like the tech behind Zcash, or I forget what other projects are implementing it, but sort of advanced encryption. And then the next item is reputations. So once you have digital money and you have this digital private sort of public, that operates under digital pseudonyms, you can start having a credible reputation that's built off of the transactions within this community. So, someone is trying to sell ebooks online, and they accept Bitcoin, and someone can say, oh, well, I sent so and so Bitcoin, and here's the transaction that I did so, and the seller who gave me the ebook, here's the file, and it's signed by them. And so you can begin building trust in a purely online setting that is completely exterior to call it the nation state model of trust building, which is predicated on they would use the word violence, or the monopoly of force. So the police and the military and the court system. These are sort of the night watchman state functionalities. So then now that go ahead.
I just had a question related to that. Is the digital pseudonym is unique to each planet as far as relating this to Urbit? Isn't that right? So that's how the reputation continues on. Like if you did something bad or wrecked your reputation, you'd have to kind of buy a new planet and start over, basically, because it's always linked to that. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yes. So the way Urbit identities work is they correspond. They're non-fungible, right? So you have to accrue reputation under a given Urbit identity. For example, I'm Pindet Timot, and I would like to keep the good name of Pindet Timot as clean as possible. So I have I've done my best to treat everyone on the Urbit network with respect, for example. And when I will do transactions for Bitcoin on Urbit, I will try to preserve the reputation, because reputation is an asset. It should be formally understood that way. It's not just some transient thing. It should be thought of sort of formally as property. So that relates then going on to information markets. So certain information out there is always going to be more valuable than other information. And truly, the point of the original idea of the internet was passing information back and forth. So this can be very basic stuff like the details that you might get today from Google, like just basic discoverability type metadata. So you want to know where a restaurant is and what time they stay open till. Or ultimately, it could be something very, very important, like a data set that was developed by some scientific organization. It could even be data that's sensitive or classified in sort of the truest in the most punk, at the punk end of the spectrum. And so being able to move this information around and transact with it, you can ultimately, as Tim hypothesized, form a functional black market, or rather many black markets. And so you can have full scale human coordination that is undesignated, that is beyond the scope of the state. And finally, as a result of this, if you would infer, perhaps a certain amount of, tax noncompliance, or just the increased irrelevance of many of the regulatory and bureaucratic bodies that exist today. He uses the word collapse of governments, but it's more of an obsolescing of government, and an obsolescence of these systems that we're currently using, in favor of these distributed software networks that scale globally and across borders and without censorship. And if you put your your classical liberal hat on, you can think of this sort of as a way of instantiating a certain conception of natural rights in the internet era. So it's less, again, less idealistic, less that you ought to have the right to free speech, or that you ought to have the right to free assembly, but rather that with the tool of cryptography, it's 100% fully securitized. It is permissionless. You can access this from any computer, anywhere, anytime, and unless you're deprived of access to the internet itself, you could not be deprived of your ability to freely traffic in all of this communication, association, information, and products. So as I said, this is sort of I think of this as a description of the historical hypothesis of crypto anarchy. I don't take it necessarily as a prescription, but I think that you can see very neatly where we've had encryption. Satoshi created digital money. Now we have anonymous networks, and Urbit is now really putting us on track for the fourth item here, digital pseudonyms, which will get us on to the more robust and intricate use cases farther along. So are there any questions about that? Yeah, someone said something?
No questions so far.
Okay, cool. So moving back a little bit, these are two economic texts which I studied when I was in college, which originally got me into Bitcoin, which is what eventually got me into Urbit. And so they are The Denationalization of Money by Friedrich Hayek, and How Would the Invisible Hand Handle Money by George Selgin and Larry White, who are currently in they're scholars at the Cato Institute. So I grouped these together. So just a brief word on each. So Hayek, his book was hypothesizing that we would have a system of competitive currencies, and that this would slowly lead to private monies, and this theory was further developed by Selgin and White to say that to basically describe how this system might come along, and that's their system of free banking, which is essentially that banks would be permitted to issue banknotes freely, and they would, because banks would be ultimately more responsible than, say, central banks, that bank money could potentially outcompete fiat currency, and we would see this uh, sort of private, like market-based approach to improving currency. So of course, none of this has come to pass. We live under the true zenith of technocratic central banking, and so the uh, the things that Selgin and White, currently work on, beyond, the theory of free banking, right now at the Cato Institute, is essentially, incremental reforms to the current system of, highly technocratic central banking. So if you're familiar with, the way that, for example, the Fed targets interest rates, they have the dual mandate of full employment and price stability, right? So this is balance unemployment and inflation, and we don't have to go into how that's sort of a farcical thing. You can talk to me after if you want to talk about the Phillips curve or something like that. But for now, their idea is that you should shift to GDP and GDP targeting, and that's their incremental reform on the central banking system. So this is really the system here that I'm trying to describe is basically the difference between the incrementalist and the radically idealist approach for iterating critique on political economy, the system of economics, the system however you would like to define it. So obviously the cypherpunks, they were radical idealists, and the Selgin and White, they're institutional people wearing coat and ties. I say that, but I like them both tremendously. So it's not intended as a dig. It's just really it represents the legacy institutional way of affecting change. So we have the dialectic between idealism and incrementalism, and so here's I guess what my or some of my thinking on this is influenced by a guy named Nick Land. Some know him as the father of accelerationism, and so effectively, his hypothesis is that the dialectic here is completely driven by the acceleration of techno capital, and so he has this great I would call it a working draft of a book called Cryptocurrent. I highly recommend you read it if you are interested at all in this sort of philosophical background of Bitcoin. But he talks about how basically Bitcoin is dematerializing all of these institutional processes, right? So they're all basically moving into the purely digital spaces where the monetary policy of Bitcoin, for example, that was set in stone by Satoshi in the white paper, but to the only extent that there are changes to the Bitcoin protocol, for example, they're litigated in IRC forums, on Twitter, and Bitcoin dev mailing lists, and they're extremely apart from any sort of official process. If you study policy making, for example. So basically, the what this represents, and I won't bore you by reading both of those tweets or both of those blurbs verbatim, but with Bitcoin, you know, the objectives of capital are now basically unbound, and they're no longer bound by the official process. They can occur at the rate of software development and software propagation. So we have sort of the seed of something that can ultimately grow very quickly. And to put it another way, computers are now they're accelerating spontaneous order, emergent order that is not top down but bottom up, not arborescent but rhizomatic. And so this is, in Nick's words, this is the idea that critique is automated. So that's sort of like a Marxist word. I don't claim Marxism, but that's sort of the the academic background of all this stuff. Is like, well, how do you take your theory and press it on the world? And so that's mainly why I'm trying to use these tools like Urbit and Bitcoin to do that. I'll quickly move on with this quote. I read that your center has a Christian aspect to it. So he that loveth silver shall not be satisfied with silver, nor he that loveth abundance with increase. This is also vanity. So the backside of Nick's theory of accelerationism is that if you take the process of capital too far and it becomes too self-referential and dematerialized, ultimately what you run the risk of is winding up with the paperclip maximizer that reduces Earth to the smoking cinder, right? So accelerationism was always intended, as I said, that Marxist idea that the way to defeat capitalism would be to accelerate it so far that it would collapse on itself. So all this is to say, I don't try to hide behind this verse to say that I don't have any true beliefs in any of this, but I think it sort of completes the circle of thinking about radically altering the state of the world. So just to sort of wrap up on a happy note, we're far from conquering the world yet. Urbit is basically just a pretty merry band of people that are interested in owning the computing environment that they're involved with. I could say the same applies quite nicely to Bitcoin. And so yeah, it's basically been, for me at least, just one sort of very fun, hilarious mission that I've met good people with. And so if you would like to get on Urbit, please get in touch with me, and I can help get you set up. As I said, we'll be releasing the Bitcoin wallet next in actually three weeks, 20 days approximately. So if you're interested in that, please check us out. And yes, as I said, we'd be happy to offer you guys some amount of time of free hosting on Tlon's hosting backend, and you can continue on with hosting after that period is over, or you have the option to take your Urbit ID for free and go self-host, since that is sort of what ultimately this is about. So thank you for your patience in indulging me in those explanations. I would be happy to take any questions if you have them.
Great. Do you have any questions? Okay. Let's see if you want to come on the app.
Let's stop the screen share if you could, Christian.
Sure.
I can do that somehow, but yeah, we'll turn it around and we'll have the students come up here.
Sure. So that microphone at the front of the room, I think there's some feedback process by which I can't hear you if you're speaking in front of that one. Wherever Justin is working. Sorry about that.
The Bitcoin wallet on Urbit, we purchase Bitcoin on there, then buy products on Urbit, or do we have to have our own Bitcoin from somewhere else, then load it up to Urbit?
Yeah, good question. Long term, I would like to have the ability to just buy Urbit on Bitcoin. In fact, that was the original thing that drew me to the project, was the prospect of using Urbit to run a decentralized exchange. But for right now, you do need some Bitcoin to get going. But long term, yeah, if you want to help me build the Bitcoin exchange on Urbit where you can buy it directly, please please get in touch.
So I had a question, Christian, and I don't know if this has happened to you, but so about 4 years ago, I was always talking to my friends about Bitcoin, and I was an annoying Bitcoin person. And then about 3 years ago, I think I turned into an annoying Urbit person. And a lot of the people that agreed with me about Bitcoin, it was hard to pitch them on Urbit because they thought that Urbit was something that's kind of either somehow competing with Bitcoin, or that it was some other not good coin.
Yeah, a shitcoin. I had the same reaction. So not to cut you off, but I think I understand your question of like, why is Urbit not a shitcoin? So I'll, because it's on the roadmap, man. So there are various categories of cryptographic property that are important to complete the system, so to speak. The TIMS system, right? So digital pseudonyms is one of them, and so you have, of course, some options for well, what do you want to use as the anchor for your network address? And so you could say, okay, well, maybe Bitcoin could serve as this if you wanted to use Bitcoin keys. But of course, with identities, you want to have some sort of programmability to them, such that you're not necessarily beholden to the rigid rules of Bitcoin to update them and migrate them to. You also want to have some additional metadata that can be associated with them, like Urbit has a feature called censuring, which means you tell the entire network that someone else is a bad actor, and it makes it easy to form a blacklist or a corresponding whitelist for good people. So and then obviously you can't just have people assign their own digital pseudonym, because that's what we have currently on the internet, right? Anyone can create an infinite number of internet identities. We have uh, that's how you get spam. Like, this is how you get spam. Uh, so if you want to have any semblance of a legible experience online now, you have to use these social networks that underwrite and safeguard the identity ledgers. Like, Twitter says, all right, well, there's only going to be one Justin on Twitter. There's only going to be one Jack. There's only going to be one Pindet Timon, right? So that's completely, I won't bore you on explaining why that model has failed. I think if you use Twitter on a regular basis, you appreciate that the client server paradigm has sort of collapsed in on itself.
So Justin mentioned his wife having a photography business last time and showed how that interface might work on Urbit. And so I'm wondering, if you're running a small business, this will give you the option to more easily accept Urbit as a payment. But then the owner could also do it kind of the good old-fashioned way. And let's say she accepts Visa, give me your card number and I'll process it, of course, independently of Urbit, or mail me a check or whatever to do a transaction. But will all of the planets have some sort of Bitcoin wallet that's integral to its identity, or will it just be an option to have?
Yes, great question. So because the Urbit identity is already a piece of cryptographic property, you can actually use it to exclusively derive, Bitcoin keys. So it is by default a Bitcoin wallet. Now, that doesn't mean you have to use it. You can import, Bitcoin private keys from, a hardware wallet that you bring, or you could import a seed otherwise. But to get the payment user experience that you can just type in someone's Urbit ID and send them Bitcoin without having to traffic back and forth a Bitcoin address. That is there by default.
Anybody else have a question? I got one other one, as long as I'm up here. I know we're going to hear this, and I'm just curious what your response would be to somebody who says, well, this whole Urbit and Bitcoin thing is obviously going to be encouraging bad people to do bad things, human trafficking, drugs, et cetera, et cetera. What's your response to criticism like that?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't accept the question. Why don't we all, sit inside on a sunny day because you might get sunburned? What can I say? We can leave like the Thomas Hobbes book aside, but there's that's like it's the common retort, right? That it almost doesn't make sense to pay the question respect.
I had a question, Christian, relating to something that you actually mentioned trying to talk about considered before. One of the worries that I would have putting my money associated with an Urbit identity would be if, for whatever reason, the government decided that Urbit was harmful and wanted to prevent that. And so basically, my question is on the feasibility of preventing Urbit from being used. Can your ISP, your internet service provider, tell if you're using Urbit?
That's a good question, and it's probably a question better formulated or better posed to Ted Blackman, who's our network engineer. He's a Robness Rickfer on Urbit and Twitter, I think. But I believe your ISP could potentially observe that it was like an Urbit related packet, unless you were until we like transition Urbit networking to something like Tor. So until we develop like higher level sort of onion routing style, um, onion routing, a packet, whatever you call it, networking protocol. Of course, your ISPs, it would be like the same situation between your ISPs and currently running Tor, right? So it's like you can use Tor. ISPs know that they can be used for whatever bad purposes, but they still permit the traffic. So one day we're going to make them cut your internet, but by that point, I think that hopefully the network, the Urbit network of galaxies, stars, and planets, the galaxies and stars ought to be a robust enough network that they could begin collaborating to perhaps even subsume internet service provider services.
I was getting the next question. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, so I don't know if this question actually has much to do with the Bitcoin side of it, but just more of a general Urbit question.
Sure.
With Urbit, do you expect it to be something similar to like a major player in the similar sense of like social media, so like Instagram or Facebook kind of thing? Because I understand how Urbit can be this very cool niche. I think it's pretty neat. But do you expect it to get as massive as something like where everyone knows what Twitter is and everyone knows what Facebook is? If so, when do you have a timeline of when you would like to see something like that?
Yeah, sure. So sort of like, I don't know, are you familiar with the hyper Bitcoinization thesis that Daniel Krawitz wrote way back? Sort of the idea that one day everyone will have to use Bitcoin or stay poor. So I think that without trying to predict too much, I'm reticent to make predictions, but I can say this. I think that the way that these systems work out is frequently in terms of the minority rule. So as in the intolerant minority wins because they're unwilling to use anything but Urbit. But the majority is just ambivalent and they want to go where the content is, so they have to get Urbit because other people got there first. It's sort of the question of why is all lemonade in North America kosher if the Jewish population is such a small percentage. It's because of that minority rule dynamic, and we see this play out in I guess many domains where the Bitcoin community as well as the Urbit community, they're very focused on privacy, and so when this small group is focused on privacy, if you want to communicate with those people, you need to be using privacy compatible technologies, and so that effectively is how it will propagate out, even if the average person isn't a cypherpunk. Rarely, people rarely are. But a few small motivated few can work with leverage.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I had one more question, which was, with hyper Bitcoinization, the idea is that everything is Bitcoin. You can use Bitcoin, without even really realizing that you're using Bitcoin, right? Or it's not even really a choice.
Right. Yeah, the unconscious usage. Exactly.
Yeah. So, do you see Urbit's implementation of Bitcoin as making Bitcoin easier to use,
And then does that therefore then make Urbit more mandatory? Do these two things feed each other's cycles rather than just mixing them all together?
Right. So I think that number one, the sort of the line that I've always had in my head about Bitcoin on Urbit is that it should be fully sovereign Bitcoin usage, up to whatever the state of the art cryptographic standard is that's been built, with simultaneously the user experience of something like the Cash App or Venmo. And so naturally for most people, I would say I'm a Bitcoin, nut, Bitcoin fanatic. Unfortunately, it consumes a lot of my brain power. But even I still have trepidation dealing with private keys, custodying Bitcoin. I don't like the process at all. It's really it's such high power money that you're going to burn yourself on it if you're not careful. And it's really probably best to enlist the help of some sort of specialist to help you do so. And in that sense, yeah, I think that the objective is help enlist software developers like Urbit devs, or like Selgin and White's free banks, right? So financial institutions that are now adopting Bitcoin, enlist them to propagate these systems. Like Tlon, for example, runs its hosting on a GCP backend. Or you could run a hosting provider using AWS. So enlist these systems to help scale the technology without taking off too much of the sort of cypherpunk edge. Obviously, there's a trade-off. The centralized exchange is the great example of this. Coinbase has a great user experience, but it's fully custodial. So try to find ways that you can scale without compromising the cryptographic principles.
Any other questions? Okay, let's give Christian a round of applause.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. This has been really fun. Yeah, as I said, I will give Justin information. Justin, why don't you take down everyone's email if you could, and I will email everyone information on getting on hosting, so that hopefully we could get you on Urbit this week if you're fast.
Cool. Fantastic. I see a lot of smiles. So, we're really excited, and thanks again, Christian.
Awesome.
I'll send it over to you as soon as we get them rounded up. I'll connect it tomorrow.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Good night.